Hello, back again on the Top Recap channel. This time I will tell a movie's entitled Crank, High Voltage. Let's get straight into the storyline. The story begins by showing Chev, who fell from the helicopter after he fought Verona. But instead of dying, Chev was immediately taken away by a group of people dressed in black, who put Chev in a car. Even the disappearance of Chev's body caused media and police confusion when they couldn't find his body at the scene of the crime. It turns out that when Chev was kidnapped, he could still be saved, and was immediately operated on to remove his heart. In the middle of the operation, Chev could only see several doctors taking out his heart. On the other hand, a man of Chinese descent was seen spitting at Chev because he was annoyed at being kicked out by the doctors. After the operation was completed, the doctors put the artificial heart into Chev's body. At that time, Chev was fully conscious and heard the conversation between the two doctors, who talked about whether their boss wanted to operate on Chev once again to get his organs. Chev didn't want his organs to be taken away, so he fought back. He beat up the two doctors and walked out naked. Fortunately, the hallway was empty, so Chev grabbed some clothes and went out of the building to escape the place. While trying to escape, Chev encountered some members of the Triad group who tried to catch him. But Chev, who is now back in shape thanks to the battery that saved his heart, immediately searched for the whereabouts of the person who took his heart. At that time, he meets a big man. Chev immediately approaches him and beats him up. Chev then asked who the person who had taken his heart was. At first, the big man did not want to talk, but Chev tortured the big man until the man wanted to speak. The man also gave one name, Johnny Fang, who was at a club. After getting a name and a place, Chev immediately stole a car to go to the club. Before leaving, Chev first charged his weakening heart battery. After recovering, he drove the car as fast as he could. On the way, Chev called his mainstay doctor, Dr. Miles. Getting a call from Chev surprised Miles because he thought that Chev was dead. But Chev explained that his heart was stolen by a group of triads who kidnapped him. Now, Chev wears an artificial heart, equipped with electrical capacity. Miles understood this, so he asked Chev to keep the electricity flowing into his body so that he could stay alive. Chev accepts, and then turns off his phone. While stuck at a red light, Chev met a Mexican gang who invited him to race. Feeling challenged, Chev said yes, and they accelerated their cars. But before Chev had gone far, he hit a roadblock that sent him flying out of the car. Fortunately, Chev could still stand up, so he asked about the whereabouts of the club he was looking for. Luckily, the Mexican gang was willing to help him, but before Chev went in, he asked the Mexican to electrocute him first, using a battery. He was initially hesitant, but he finally complied because Chev asked him to. After being electrocuted, Chev immediately ran very fast. Chev immediately ransacked the club, which allowed Fang to escape. After the break-in, Chev accidentally met a prostitute who was obsessed with Chev because he had saved her life. The prostitute continued to follow Chev wherever he went, even though Chev had asked her to leave, but because she knew who he was looking for, Chev was forced to take her to a club not far from where he had been. Inside, it turns out that Fang is being tortured by the Mexican mafia, who also want Chev's heart. Fang and his partner were tortured by the Mexican gang, so that Fang would hand over Chev's heart. Meanwhile, Chev suddenly meets his girlfriend, Eve, who is now working as a dancer at the club. Seeing Eve's presence certainly angers Chev, especially when a man who claims to be Eve's lover asks Chev to stay away from his girlfriend. Eve was really confused to see Chev, who was still alive. She doesn't even know what to do about it, but the prostitute who was following Chev didn't want her lover to be held by Eve, which made the two of them have a bit of a fight. Eve even smashes the prostitute's head with a glass bottle until she is unconscious. As Chev is about to take Eve away, the Mexican gang looking for him comes out of their hiding place. There was a bit of a tussle and a shootout between Chev and the Mexican gang. Chev finally manages to get Eve out of the club, but when they got outside, the police were ready to arrest him. Before the police arrested Chev, they beat him up so badly that he fell down. But a mistake was made by one of the policemen when he electrocuted Chev, which gave him power. Chev then beat up all the police officers chasing him, and even managed to steal a police car. On the way, Eve, who still didn't know what to do, asked why Chev didn't call her first. Chev replied that he had called her, but Eve didn't answer. Eve also said that after Chev disappeared, a lot of things changed, but Chev didn't care. He asked if Eve had a cell phone. Eve then gave him her cell phone. Chev called Miles again to tell him he was trying to find his missing heart. Hearing that Chev was still alive, Dr. Miles didn't expect that to happen, because, according to his calculations, Shev should have died an hour ago, but he was grateful that Shev was still alive. He then told Shev to take his heart, and he would attach it to him. Shev understood, so he hung up the phone. Because the electric gun he stole from the police had been used to electrocute himself, Shev got out of the car to get anything that could generate electricity. He happened to see two men training their dog using an electric collar. Without further ado, Shev took the collar that their dog was using and asked them both to electrocute him. But because the police were coming, Shev took the remote control and ran to avoid the police. While running, he was suddenly helped by a man who looked like Kalo, but the man explained that he was Venus, Kalo's twin brother. Shev finally got on the motorcycle that Venus was riding and ran away from that place. On the way, Shev apologized for Kalo's death. Venus explained that he was looking for the person who killed his sibling, but while they were driving, Venus's apoplexy suddenly relapsed, causing them both to bounce off the motorcycle. Shev then informed that the people who had killed Kalo had been killed by him. He had made sure his revenge was right on target. But when Venus wanted to avenge his brother's death, there was a man nicknamed the Weasel that he happened to be looking for. Shev asked Venus to take him to the horse racing stadium. Coincidentally, they fell right in front of the stadium. Finally, Shev immediately ran. He called Miles to tell him he needed electricity. Out of confusion, Miles only advised Shev to rub his skin against another person's skin to generate static electricity. Only understanding that, Shev immediately looked for people he could touch. Even Shev was forced to rub against a grandmother, who made people laugh. But suddenly, Eve arrives. Shev tells her that he needs some friction. Realizing this, Eve immediately serves Shev. They then make love in the middle of the racetrack, which makes all the spectators focus on the actions of the two of them. While making love, Shev realized that he saw Fang at the racetrack. Shev finally tried to run after him, but Fang ran away again. Fang managed to escape after he was picked up by a car. Although Venus managed to stop him, his apoplexy relapsed, making it difficult for him to control himself. When Shev met up with Venus, they were suddenly approached by a car that asked them both to get inside. It turned out to be Don Kim. Shev was very grateful that Don Kim returned to save his life. On the way, Shev tells him that his heart was stolen by a man named Johnny Fang. Now, he is chasing the man. While telling him his heart was stolen, Don Kim also told a story. He tells that there is a leader of his organization named Poon Dong. Poon Dong is now 100 years old and is dying. Many of his men were willing to donate their hearts to save Poon Dong, but none of their hearts matched him. Finally, Poon Dong received news that there was a man who had the strongest heart, Shev. Therefore, they flocked to try to kidnap Shev and take his heart. Hearing the story, Shev was very grateful that Don Kim could take him to Poon Dong. But Don Kim laughed. He wanted to take Shev to Poon Dong so he could get a huge reward. Shev realized Don Kim's intention was not to save him, but to trap him. As a result, Shev immediately attacked Don Kim. Shev managed to kill several of Don Kim's men, and Don Kim himself, until his car crashed into a pole. The scene then switches to the Weasel's men, reporting that he failed to catch Shev, because he had consequences that he had to carry out. Finally, the subordinate cut off both of his nipples, until there was nothing left. After the execution, the Weasel gave his last chance to catch Shev. This time, he asked all his men to catch Shev and not fail. On the one hand, Eve, walking aimlessly, suddenly met her boyfriend, Randy. At that time, Randy kept asking Eve to be with him and leave the crazy man, who was now being chased by various police. But Eve, who doesn't consider Randy her boyfriend, asks him not to bother her anymore. Eve then beat Randy until he was slammed quite hard. Meanwhile, Venus, who needs help from the troops, immediately calls his black friend to find the whereabouts of the Weasel. Then, the scene switches to Shev, who suddenly gets into a moving ambulance. Shev said that he needed an electric shock device specialized for the heart. The ambulance attendant finally gave the electric shock to Shev, which brought him back into shape, and he got out of the ambulance. As Shev exits the ambulance, he runs into Fang again. Wasting no time, Shev immediately went after Fang. After killing Fang's two colleagues, Shev chased him into a high-voltage area. There, Fang was severely beaten by Shev. But when Shev asked Fang to open the box he was carrying, it turned out that the box did not contain his heart, but other items disappointed Shev. When Shev was about to leave the dying Fang, suddenly, the Weasel's men came to him and immediately beat Shev unconscious. Finally, this time, Shev was kidnapped by them. When Shev was kidnapped, he was really tortured by them. Shev was pulled by an inflatable boat, so he was tossed around in the ocean. Meanwhile, on one side, Venus, who was walking at that time, accidentally met a prostitute. Apparently, she is a friend of Venus. They walked to find the whereabouts of Shev, who is now being kidnapped by El Huron. Eve, who was also in bad condition, had to be in prison after she was arrested by the police. There, she was asked several questions regarding the whereabouts of her lover, but Eve casually answered if she didn't understand what the police were asking. Back to Chev, who was facing the El Huron. There, El Huron introduced himself. He was the third brother of Verona, whom Chev had killed earlier, and now he wants Chev to see that Verona is still alive thanks to the technology that keeps her brain functioning. Although it won't last long, Verona can see how his brother avenged himself on Chev. Chev's heart device was taken first to make him weaker. Then El Huron slowly whipped Chev many times until he was in pain. But as El Huron whipped Chev, the torture had to stop when Venus arrived with his army. A battle ensued between El Huron's troops and Venus's troops. Gunfire ensued between the two of them. Meanwhile, in the distance, Miles received news that his men had succeeded in captivating Pundong. Miles's men immediately brought Pundong to his residence, and finally, Miles was able to retrieve Chev's heart. Back to the battle, Chev, who was getting weaker, found an electric pole that he could use to restart his heart. Finally, he recklessly climbed the pole and touched the electricity that made him really burn. After feeling burned, he immediately beat El Huron mercilessly. Finally, El Huron had to die after Chev threw him into the pool. Then Chev's face was completely burned. At that time, he was taken back to Miles's residence for surgery to install his heart. In the middle of an operation, Eve prayed and cried in the hope that her lover would come back to life. And sure enough, even though his entire face had been badly scarred, Chev was still alive thanks to the surgery performed by Dr. Miles. And the movie is over. Don't forget to click subscribe, like, and comment.